Hello, I'm Rob Nelson for the Christian Science Monitor. The rains have come back to the Horn of Africa. The famine has ended, but the problems that led to famine have not disappeared. More of Africa's land turns to desert every year. Armed conflicts isolate people from help, and the wars that helped turn food shortages to famine now make recovery difficult. The Monitor's Jean-Marie Condon went to northern Ethiopia to a region called Eritrea. It's a place where people living at the edge of the desert and on the front line of a relentless civil war are trying to put famine behind them.
The tree is camouflage for those who have come here to pick up the food that will keep them alive for the next 4 months. They are hiding from Ethiopian fighter planes. This is Eritrea after famine. When the people here look to the sky, they hope for rain and fear they will see planes carrying bombs.
Famine has been an effective weapon. Every now and then the Ethiopian government sends its air force and undertakes air raids over civilian targets. And one of their targets is people who come to our distribution centers to receive their food allocation.
This is the longest running war in the world. During the worst of the famine, the Ethiopians and Eritreans kept on fighting. While the West sent millions of dollars worth of food to Ethiopia, the Soviet Union sent military advisors, bullets, and bombs. The fighting is for control of this former Italian colony, given to Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie by the victorious Allies at the end of the Second World War. Today, this region, where about 2.5 million people live, is held by the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, the EPRLF. They are fighting for independence. The Marxist regime that overthrew Selassie in 1974 continues to claim control of the province, which includes the strategically desirable ports of Assab and Massawa. The war is older than many of the fighters. They've been fighting for 26 years. The two armies face one another along a line of trenches 300 miles long. Ethiopia will not give up its ports on the Red Sea. The Eritreans will not give up the idea of independence.
I'm fighting against Ethiopian colonialism.
Tesfa Mariam has been fighting on the front line for 11 years. His parents still live beyond these mountains, behind the Ethiopian lines. To him, they are living under foreign military occupation.
We will be victorious because our struggle is just. It is a question of time.
To prepare for life after victory, fighters on the front line take classes in history, mathematics, and geography.
In various regions, there are fertile lands.
The Eritrea they envision is not only liberated, but developed and self-sufficient.
By building dams along those regions, it is possible to construct modern farms.
But recovery and development will be slow and difficult. Military offensives have leveled many towns. Bombs have emptied even more.
If it was not for the war, it would have been possible for the Eritrean people to combat the famine situation. Over the years, the war has caused a lot of destruction in Eritrea. Because of the war, hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced.
This is Nakfa, about a mile from the front line. It has been attacked 9 times in the last 9 years. Now, like many Eritrean towns, it is abandoned. Only a small group of EPRLF soldiers live here. Ali said and his family used to live in Nakfa. They herded their goats and farmed along the riverbed. Like many Eritreans, the war has forced them from their home.
It was bad. Jet fighters, bombers, mortars, bazookas. We had a very difficult time. Because of the war that was going on, we were forced to leave.
Now they are camped in the hills outside of town.
We used to have lots of cattle. We would farm and eat from the land, and we had as much milk as we needed. But because of the war, we have lost much of our livestock, and we cannot farm because of the drought.
For these people, the EPLF acts as protector, a source of information and of food. In the territory it holds, it is not only the army, but the government. It provides education, health services, and is in charge of distributing relief. The EPLF brings in supplies from Sudan in trucks donated by the West or captured from the Ethiopians. The 100-mile journey over roadless desert is the Eritrean lifeline. Inside Eritrea, all movement is at night to avoid Ethiopian planes. In the early evening, buses, trucks, and Land Rovers begin plying the roads and the dry riverbeds. Factories, camouflaged during the day, also begin working at night. The Eritreans have learned to make a life for themselves in wartime. The EPLF has made a fortress of the stubborn mountains, and EPLF members have developed within themselves an equally stubborn conviction that recovery from war and famine will come.
I'm not saying that we don't lack any materials. I'm not saying that we live happily. I mean, we got what we need. But we know that one day we're going to have all those materials. We know that one day we are going to be happy.
We need freedom first. Second, rain. Third, I need to live a peaceful life. And fourth, for the Ethiopian government to be off my land. We live in Nakfa. Nakfa is our hometown. Our forefathers lived in this place, and we don't want to live anywhere else.
The United Nations cannot reach people behind rebel lines in Eritrea. It cannot, and private charities often will not, provide aid to areas that are in rebellion. Coming up, the war against drought. Eritrean farmers fighting back the desert. Eritrea has never been a fertile land, but harvests were enough for its proud people to survive. Now it would seem to take an agricultural miracle to make them self-sufficient again. In villages all over Eritrea, they are working to make that happen. Jean-Marie Condon's report continues.
The Eritreans call the ruins of Nakfa the symbol of the resistance. Despite repeated attacks, the Ethiopians have never taken Nakfa. In the center of the town lies the symbol of another kind of resistance, this garden. It is an agricultural experiment dedicated to breeding trees, crops, livestock, and vegetables that can stand up to a climate becoming drier every year. The Eritreans have also chosen to make a stand here against the growing desert.
The desert is creeping from north, from the Sahara to the southern part of Africa. And since we are located close to the Sahara Desert, the desert is creeping towards us too.
It is a phenomenon called desertification. Eritrea and all of Africa is losing more and more fertile land every year. Cultivated fields, wild vegetation, and forests are being replaced by baked earth, dry riverbeds, and dust. The desert is growing in large part because of man. People cut down trees and bushes for firewood, to clear farmland, and to build houses. Their livestock eat the natural vegetation. The earth is left bare, exposed to wind that blows off topsoil and the sun that bakes the moisture out of the soil that's left. The climate changes. The desert takes over. This part of Africa is just seeing the end of a 17-year drought, the longest this century. In the past 2 years, swarms of locusts have complicated the problem. They have moved across Ethiopia, Eritrea, and the Sudan, eating tree cover and crops that were making a comeback in the first rainy seasons after the drought. When it does rain, it rains so hard that valuable topsoil is washed away. Little moisture stays in the ground. Hamad Musa farms this land. He lives in Rura, a farming community set on a mountain plateau where the rocks, the dust, and the chronic drought have meant years of crop failure.
Since the early 70s, it gradually started to dry, and the land got worse and worse each year.
To come back from drought, the farmers here have to start from scratch. When the land stopped yielding, their farm tools were among the first possessions they sold to survive. Now they are making new tools. They use whatever metal they can find, empty shell casings, tins that once carried food aid. The farmers are using the new tools and new techniques to try to make this land produce again. For the first time, they are terracing the mountainsides. Today, Hamad Musa's neighbors have come to help him terrace his farm. The terraces are raised fields, built up like shelves to catch the moisture and topsoil that would otherwise wash away with the rain on this sloping land.
They could see the rains getting less and less from year to year, so that to replenish the water source or to conserve their water and their soil, we taught them that they should terrace their fields.
After terracing, the second step in reviving the land is getting seeds to the farmers. They will be brought up from the test site in Nakfa.
The rains couldn't support some of the cereal crops that were growing prior to the drought. And now we are changing or shifting to types of crops that resist to drought.
This is the second planting season after drought. Last year, Hamad Musa's crops failed.
The organization supplied us with some seeds to experiment on the land, but it wasn't very productive because it didn't go well with the land and because of the scarcity of water.
This year, they are trying again. The work these farmers are doing now is an act of faith. They hope that this year they will win and the desert will lose. That what they are building here will one day make them self-sufficient. They hope for more than that. They have built a school for their children to prepare them for a day when this mountain community is connected to the outside world by trade and modern communication and good roads.
Who can write small letter M? Me. Who can write a small letter M?
All Eritrean school children learn English. It is another act of faith.
Who can show me capital?
Tucked away in a camouflaged schoolhouse, they are separated by miles of desert and mountain and a generation of war from places where they might need to know this language.
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Teachers waiting at the door.
Teachers waiting at the door.
5, 6, 7, 8.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Run to school and don't be late.
Run to school and don't be late.
9.
سمعنا كفلة قلت
Adults can go to school as well to learn basic mathematics and to read in their own language.
Well, I think literacy, the importance of literacy is obvious. It will help in many ways. It will help the people to adopt more improved techniques of production. It would make it much easier to provide them with technical assistance.
Educating the population is particularly important as Eritrea mounts its offensive against the changing environment. Public works projects are a major part of the fight. For them to work, the people have to be able to man the projects themselves. These men were representatives of their village, trained by the Department of Agriculture. They had to learn to use this kind of machinery to keep their wells free of silt and the community water supply clean. Dams constructed to collect water must also be maintained. This riverbed used to be dry, and these people had to walk 2 or 3 hours to the nearest water source. This new source must be conserved and also kept clean. These seedlings don't look like much now, but they are the beginnings of a new forest. In Rura, The plan is that these mountainsides will someday be covered with trees. It is a dream agriculture experts and educators have to communicate to the people here. It is Eritrea's hope for turning back the desert.
When we come back, the nomads of Eritrea. New lives changing old traditions. We think of desert as home to the nomads, but the expanding desert hit them hardest of all. Year after year of drought destroyed their herds, and many have been forced to learn a new way of life.
The nomads of Eritrea are among those hardest hit by famine. They are one of the most isolated peoples in the world. As the seasons change, they travel, moving from lowlands to highlands, looking for pasture. They camp by the side of the road, as they have for generations, tending their herds. The man's job is to follow the goats as they graze. They are the measure of his wealth, his currency, his source of food, and a point of pride.
I have milk, I get meat, I get butter, and I get money by selling goats. So I have everything I need. That's what I like about this life.
And in all his life, the nomad will acquire little else. While the man is out with the goats, the nomad woman must carry the burden of the work in the camp. Islamic law teaches her to give total obedience to her husband. The teachings of the Quran, his knowledge of his goats and of the land, are the timeless constants to which the nomad's life is bound. The Eritrean mountains, the rocky valleys, and the difficult earth that have made this land so hard to conquer have always stood sentry against the forces of change. But now, war and drought have changed this land. In Eritrea after famine, nothing is constant or predictable anymore. And nothing has changed so dramatically as the lives of the nomads who live here. Military lines and political boundaries keep the nomads from moving as freely as they once did. Their caravans have become targets for Ethiopian planes. It is difficult and dangerous to reach the markets in Sudan and on the coast of the Red Sea. Drought destroyed much of their livestock, and this traditionally proud, independent people have had to turn to outside help to survive. This is the settlement of Agra. These farmers used to be nomads. Now they own few goats and are learning to raise corn and vegetables instead. The idea of cultivating the land is something the nomad isn't used to. He needs help. EPRLF engineers and 500 fighters have come here to build this irrigation canal, changing the course of a river so rain from the mountains will water these fields year after year. Materials are scarce. The stone must be quarried by hand in the local hills. Empty shell casings are turned into reinforcing columns. The hope is this project will set an example and convince other nomads to settle and farm. Someday, Agra may support 200 families. Some who work at Agra have settled half an hour's walk away in the village of Halibut. In any new town, there are problems. The 2,000 settlers here have to get used to living close to their neighbors for the first time. Until now, They have never worried about dirty water, never lived in one place long enough to understand litter. At the village clinic, an EPRLF doctor teaches them basic public health.
We stress hygiene of the children and of themselves, especially when they are pregnant. And again, we teach them how to keep their environment clean and how to keep their food clean and edible.
They've also learned to govern themselves. They vote. Representatives to a village assembly rule on everything from water use to family quarrels. For the first time in this strict Islamic society, women are taking a role in the community. Hawa Idris and her family used to travel with the herds. As a woman, her job was to fetch firewood and water and do the heavy work around the camp. Now, she sits on the economic planning committee of the village assembly.
Before, I didn't have the courage I have now to be active and participate in the meeting and speak my mind.
Nearly everyone in Halibut has had to take on new roles and adopt new ways of thinking. Even the idea of using scales is something this shopkeeper had to learn.
Now I can take care of my shop very well, and I know everything about my shop. Everything here I know. The difference between what I used to be and what I am now is like the difference between the sky and the earth.
To the nomads of Eritrea, their way of life seemed as eternal as the sky and the earth. But the guns of war have changed the skies, and drought has changed the earth. Recovery in Eritrea will depend on the ability of its people to master these changes, on the triumph of a people's will over a harsh land. I'm Jean Marie Condon for the Christian Science Monitor.